Right, reminder to myself, I must not mention subways in this one. I promised promised any listeners I have that I wouldn't. Um, oh, good lord, I've already started recording. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, it's my last day here, last day in New York. Indeed it was. And as I mentioned yesterday, I took the day to go and visit the Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island. I took ferries over to there. It's a very, very beautiful ferry journey across the harbour, I have to say. It quite got my British blood up. Made me want to spend a lot more time on water. If all this law stuff goes wrong, well, I might run off to sea and become a right old nautical cove, a proper salty sea dog, which sounds like it could be fun. Frankly, it could be fun. I should also give the warning again. There were quite a few more selfies in this one. I'm terribly sorry. I seem to be getting more vain as I go along. By the end of my American trip, all you will have is massive close-ups of my face. Just a quick warning for you there. You might want to stop. I should think about halfway through Chicago or Vegas, probably. Yes. So yes, I took the ferry over. I caught it from Battery Park, which was very pleasant. Went through all the security checks there, and yes, so I did that. I went onto I stood at the bow of the ship, and I think I cut quite a dash, standing there, sort of leaning, sort of pensively over. I think if somebody would have taken a shot from the side, I would have looked quite the dashing rogue. Unfortunately, there wasn't anyone there who I asked to take a picture, because I thought that would be vanity beyond even that which I've achieved just yet. You've got to take these things slowly, you know. So yes, so I stood there and I looked dashing. What we took the 10 minutes or so journey over. There's good views across the bay. Quite a few examples of early congressional overspends and presidential overspends in all the unused forts there that were originally designed to keep us Brits out, because apparently that was the thing that needed to happen, because apparently the Americans were quite fond of New York. Who'd have thought it? And they didn't realise that we could have probably put it to much better use than they would by maybe, I don't know, building a tea shop somewhere, or possibly just letting it rain a little more. Reminds me of the old story about the Duke of Westminster, who was asked if the American embassy could move onto Grosvenor Square. They asked him if they could have the land to build their new embassy on Grosvenor Square, and he turned around and very aptly said, "Okay, well, I'll give you that bit of land if you'll give me back the state of Virginia, which you took from my ancestors in the War of Independence," which seemed like a fair exchange to me. Evidently, the American ambassador didn't think so, because that didn't happen. And now they've gone to Battersea, because apparently that's where all the embassies are going these days. Clearly international diplomacy is going to the dogs. Anyway, so clearly with all the overspending problems they're having nowadays, that's not a new situation. They've been having that since at least they were building all these useless little squat-bellied forts. Some lovely views of the skyline as well. I've got a few good pictures, I think, of sort of the whole skyline from the financial district back to sort of upper Manhattan, and I think I even managed to get a couple. Excuse me, yawning there. I even managed to get a couple, I think, with both the Empire State and the One World Trade Center in them. So the old meeting the new there in some of those pictures. There was some suspicion of rain today. We were actually scheduled for a storm. I say scheduled, I don't think anyone was actually scheduling it. They were just predicting it. But we didn't actually have any rain. It was a bit threatening, but nothing worrisome. So I landed on Liberty Island, where you get off first. I picked up my audio guide. I got a free audio guide, which I thought would be interesting. Actually, mostly it was just amusing. It seemed to have a remarkable assistant on America still being a land that values freedom for all and lack of abuse of human rights. Clearly they're forgetting what happens on one of the other islands that they're currently occupying, or part of the island at least, and all that waterboarding. But other than that, yes, absolutely they value human rights and free speech to an extent. that extent being the point at which you say anything. I do feel that perhaps one should question the audio guide when it talks about freedom and democracy, and one should perhaps extend the question to the president: just how is that NSA program going nowadays? But you get there and you turn your audio guide on and you listen to its rubbish and its sort of vaguely patronising. Of course, when the Statue of Liberty built, most of Europe was still ruled by monarchs, which isn't strictly speaking factually accurate, and does come across more as a sort of, oh, look at those quaint little Europeans, aren't they sweet with their old-fashioned ways and loveliness. But yes, so the Statue of Liberty is there. Now, I was surprised. I thought she was short. She looks like a bit of a dwarf from behind, I have to say. She doesn't look much better from the front. She's a bit of a shorty, really. She's got a very noble face. I think you have to say that. I'm going to keep calling her Doris for shorthand, just because frankly her face looked like a Doris. She had the noble bearing that a Doris would need these days to stop being laughed at for being called Doris. Yes, Doris is standing there, and she's proudly handling and holding up aloft her torch, or what the Americans insist is a torch, and of course her tablet of laws. Now, personally, I dispute this. I think it was actually a sort of elaborate joke that the French were playing on the Americans when they built the thing, and I think she's actually carrying an ice cream cornet and the receipt for the ice cream cornet in the other hand. So I think it's an elaborate joke, riffing on the idea that sometimes the rest of the world can be a bit cold to the Americans, and that the Americans are trying to bestow the ice cream of friendship all over the receipt of ingratitude offered to them as they perceived by the rest of the world. I might be slightly overthinking this. I also did notice, I mean, from behind you get a good view of one of her feet. It protrudes from under the toga, and I did notice actually she's wearing a pair of Reeboks, which I was quite fascinated by. I didn't think they had Reeboks back in 1880, but apparently they do, and she was wearing a pair. No doubt they will come back into fashion within the next few years. So that was very surprising. I don't know who fitted her for them. I didn't realise they did choose that big, but yes, she's wearing a pair of Reeboks. If anyone from Reebok is listening to this, by the way, and you want me to pay me for these outright lies that I'm using to advertise your brand, then please feel free to get in touch, and we'll negotiate some sort of settlement. Yes, so I continued listening to the tour, and I sort of walked around to the front of the statue and had a look there. And I found it somewhat ironic, actually, that in addition to the confusion I made earlier over the NSA and stuff, I did notice that the Statue of Liberty is now somewhat ironically covered in CCTV cameras, which demonstrates the trust, I think, that you have to have when dealing with an icon such as that. Yes, and then I sort of looked over the bay a bit, really, from there, because the island's quite a good position to see the bay, because you can see a lot of things. And one of the things I did notice was a Chinook flying. I don't know, actually, they might not be called Chinooks over here. It's one of the double-rotor helicopters. I can't remember what they're called over here. I know they're Chinooks back home. But I saw one of those flying past the One World Trade Center, which I thought was quite symbolic of the sort of modern American power. You know, it's the key bits are these days not diplomacy and charisma, but trade and military force, which I thought was quite appropriate. I did try and get some pictures of the flag as well. There was a good flagpole on Liberty Island, but unfortunately the Stars and Stripes don't seem to be very keen to be photographed, and every time I snapped the lens, they seem to sort of flicker away into the distance. I think I did get a few decent ones eventually. But yes, so after that I reboarded the ferry. I was on the same ferry as I went over to the island, but made a couple of trips back, and I hopped over to Ellis Island, the old immigration centre, and that was very interesting. It's still quite empty because they haven't got all the artifacts and stuff in the museum still in storage after Hurricane Sandy, which flooded a lot of the island. So there's a lot of pictures there, but not a lot of actual artifacts. But it was still very empty, very empty, very interesting. It was quite bleak. I have to say that I have to admit there was a kind of, in places there was a sort of vaguely concentration campish sort of feel to it. It was certainly a luxury one, but it was quite bleak in its own way. It's got a very impressive registration hall in there as well, which I think I know it's quite a common image in documentaries and stuff. I have got some pictures which you can seek out if you wish to. And then I returned. I took the ferry back to Battery Park to go and find some dinner, because by that point it was getting on a bit. Yes, so I went through the park and I noticed a sort of inner city farm there. I can only assume it's battery farming. I don't know. I'm sorry, if you want, you can mentally edit that joke out, because it really was pretty awful. But I thought I'd head over to Brooklyn, because I've not been over to Brooklyn yet. So I thought I'd head in that direction. So I went over to Brooklyn. I crossed. I actually took the tube out there, and I had dinner in a nice little pizzeria, a nice little Italian restaurant, sort of directly under the bridge, with a lovely view of the financial district, which was very nice. So yes, so I ate there, and then I thought I better walk the calories off. So I walked back over the Brooklyn Bridge. I headed up to find the footpath. It was very nice. It's lovely view, and the sun was setting, so I've got a few shots of it. I should make something poetic here, shouldn't I? A couple of shots of it glittering gloriously over the spires of the great spires of commerce and wealth, and illuminating the capitalist pathways to enlightenment and freedom in a manner which is almost as pretentious as this statement. So I walked that off, and then I sort of walked back slowly. I thought, so instead of taking the tube back from the financial district, which is obviously the easy option, I thought, well, no, it's my last night here. I'll walk back. I'll walk back as far as I can. I'll walk back up to Central Park, basically. And so I did. So I walked back to Central Park, and I had a look around. I saw a few things that were a bit further south of the Flatiron Building, which was previously as far down as I'd gone on foot, which was quite interesting. And yes, so I walked back, and it was nice to see the Empire State Building lit up with a French flag. I think I only assume that was for D-Day, for the 70th anniversary. Yes, it is still tomorrow, as of about half an hour before it becomes today. So yes, so that was very nice to see that all lit up. I did also get a picture of the Chrysler Building, which is the best one I have, but I haven't actually got one from up close. It's the best one I have though on today's video and today's swathe of papers. Yes, so I'm actually going to stop this recording here, and then I'm going to start a new one for a sort of review of my time in New York, just so I don't confuse things in my own mind. So yes, so I shall see you in a minute, or in a few seconds, as it's more likely to be for you, just to conclude my time in New York with a few closing statements. So, concluding remarks on New York. I leave tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, so I won't have a chance to do these tomorrow, because I'll mostly be in Washington for tomorrow, so I'll start my Washington recordings then. Right, New York is a wonderful city, really, really it is. If you get the opportunity to visit it, do, because it really is worth it. The only word I've been racking my brains to think of a sort of one word that sums it up, and I'm going to have to come out with the cliche bustling, because it really is the only one. Never have so many people walked in a manner that looks so purposeless for such a purpose in any point in time, I don't think. I've actually written down a few points here. That's my sort of layman's guide to being in New York. Now, some of these are genuine points, some of these are merely excuses to pull out jokes that I didn't have a chance or forgot to tell in previous ones. But whatever they are, this does form the core of what I would call my layman's guide to New York. So the first thing, don't be worried about car horns, okay? I am very much of the opinion, I formed the opinion while I've been here, that certainly for taxi drivers and probably for most other New Yorkers as well, the cars should come default with the horn sounding all the time, and there should be a button to turn it off when you don't want to sound it. It wouldn't be a very used button. If I was making a film of this, it would be covered in cobwebs and dust. But don't worry about it, because they sound them for everything. Even if it's obvious that the person they're honking at can't do anything, or is just waiting to turn a corner, they will still honk them. That I don't know whether it's impatience or whether they just like the noise. I like to think that they're basically a load of sort of 3-year-olds going, "Yay, listen to the honky noise." Sorry, that was a pretty gay 3-year-old, but I hope I didn't offend anyone there. I didn't mean that derogatorily. I just so don't worry about the horns. Also, don't worry about jaywalking. I know technically it's illegal over here. I think I believe it is anyway. But nobody else seems to worry about it. Not even the police. They do it all the time. And you know, when in Rome, do what Romans do. When in New York, do what New Yorkers do. So feel free to jump across the roads whenever you feel like it. Try and make sure there's a car not coming, but from what I've seen of people doing, that doesn't seem to be an essential element of it. And you can always sort of swear at the person who really hits you, or sort of dive out the way in a scenic tuck and roll. Other things, staying out in, I've been staying out in the Bronx. Now, some of the regions of New York don't get a brilliant media portrayal. I have to admit, going to stay out here, I was a little dubious. I know it's not the worst place in New York, but still, you know, the way the media portrays it, you'd think these places are sort of festering pits of crime. They're really not. They're just a bunch of people trying to get on with their lives. You know, I'm not staying in the most salubrious part of town. There's a lot of very rundown buildings and a lot of people clearly struggling to make their existence. And I mean, in its own way, that's a tragedy, but also they are doing the best they can with what they have, and what they are doing is, on the whole, a very good job. So don't be afraid of coming to these outer districts, because they really are fascinating places. And yeah, there's crime in them, but there's crime in the centre as well. You know, don't be afraid of them, really don't. But the city as a whole, I mean, is a massive mix of cultures and people. It's called, I think it's probably the sort of it's symbolic of America as a whole, I suppose. All the there's immigrants, and there's people who've lived here for centuries, and people whose families have lived here for centuries. If they've lived here for centuries, then quite frankly, they probably don't need to listen to my commentary because they've seen it all before. The taxi drivers, New York cabs seem to be very good. The taxi drivers do enjoy a chat. There's sort of few. I've taken, I think, 3 taxis while I've been here, and each of them has said at the end of the journey, "Oh, it was nice to chat with somebody." So I think it's something they don't get so often. So make sure you do chatter with them, because they always have interesting comments to make. On the metro, you will always be serenaded. It's lovely live music. I've had a Musical World tour. I had Lean on Me today, the old Bill Withers number, and at a gospel choir the other day. That was quite a fun one. Watching them trying to squeeze their way down a tube carriage while still singing hymns at the top of their voice. And I know I said I wouldn't mention subways at the beginning of this, but ignore the squalor. Just pretend it's kittens and puppies. No, actually don't pretend it's kittens and puppies, because there's trains coming along there at a hell of a lick. So if you pretend it's kittens and puppies, there's going to be a lot of dead kittens and puppies living around. Pretend it's, I don't know, sweeties and flowers. There you go, sweeties and flowers. That's what it is in the subway. It's not filth. Don't be scared. I mean, this is mostly to my liberal, wishy-washy European friends. Don't be afraid by the weaponized police officers. They're all very friendly. They're not at all trigger-pumping goons who would rather shoot at a problem than actually try and solve it. At least I don't think they are. There probably are 1 or 2 that fit that description. Speak to people is the other big one. If you see someone not doing anything, then do ask them. Do ask them questions, and they'll all, they've all got their little story. This sort of harkens back to what I was saying when I was waxing lyrical about how good it was on top of the Rockefeller Center. Everyone's got a story to tell. Stay, listen to them, and learn from them, because they are fantastic. Some of the people you'll meet are just fantastic. Church names. Church names over here are very different back home. Back home they're very simple. It's always, it's St. James or St. John or St. Mary's or whatever. Over here, they don't really go for that. They have the saint name at the beginning, and then they have a long sort of appellation afterwards. So it's St. Michael the Proud and Noble, Laws of Heaven, or St. Jonathan of Providence, and good fortune in all your dealings, especially when you're trying to earn a lot of money from somebody. Yeah, so they're make a note of them, because there's some really good ones, I have to say. A couple on sort of advertising actually as well. Ignore adverts there's a lot of adverts on the Metro for paralegals. Now that sounds very exciting. They sound like they're sort of just lawyers who sort of parachute in. Now actually paralegals aren't sort of parachuting lawyers. What they are is lawyers for ghosts. So I mean, by all means remember their names, but they're not going to be any use to you until you're dead. After that they might become useful. Another one is that there's a lot of signs on the tube from Con Edison, which is one of the electricity companies over here, telling you to report steam coming from manhole covers in the street. You probably don't need to worry about doing that because nobody else seems to. Every second manhole you pass will have a sort of tower of steam coming from it, and no one else seems to be bothered by it. So I sort of reason that if nobody else is going to freak out about it, then why should I? Do remember it's a big city, so there's a lot of designer clothes stores. You can distinguish those very clearly. They're the ones that have 4 items of clothing on display, and then a lot of other people in pictures on the walls wearing clothes that are nowhere to be found, and they probably don't have in stock. There's also the fact that you feel a short, sharp stabbing pain in your wallet the moment you enter, and the constriction around your wallet will continue until you leave. Another thing, I forgot to bring my swimming trunks with me, and I'm sort of hoping that when I get to some of the more amenable districts and places I'm visiting, I might be able to do a little swimming. I'd quite like to swim in the Pacific, just so I can say I have. So I went into one of the shops. Now, if you go into a clothes shop and they're offering 30% off swim shorts, don't buy them. For one very simple reason: they don't actually mean the cost. What they mean is the legs. So you will end up in essentially a pair of hot pants. I'm not going to directly link that to me for fear of inducing a series of vomiting incidents that would bring to mind a second Spanish flu. But yes, just be careful when buying your swim shorts. And finally, and this is most importantly because my eyes still have not quite fully recovered, remember, when you're particularly in the financial district, wear sunglasses or a welder's mask, whichever seems most appropriate to you at the time. If you want to save your eyes, that is what you have to do, I found. My blackened pits are still recovering, and eventually, no doubt, will. I'm hoping they might recover in time for some of the more scenic bits of Washington. I shall report back on that when I get there. And on that subject, I'm going to have to sign off because I need to pack my bag ready for the morning, because I have to leave my hotel at 7. So yes, I shall speak to you tomorrow. I shall report on the journey between New York and Washington. I'm actually on a commuter train between New York and Washington, so it might not be quite so scenic. But I shall report back at the end of the day from the commuter train and where I am in Washington. So for now, this is me saying good night, America, and the rest of the world, and I will speak to you tomorrow. Ciao for now.